welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with those movers and shakers, those film and TV makers, the producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, composers, film editors, sound mixers, choreographers, stay tuned, stuntmen, stunt coordinators, VFX gurus, you name it and you know I'll talk to them, and I do. So here we are again, another week. Can you believe that this is now next week is Thanksgiving. I think it's next week. Yes, it is next week. Next week is already Thanksgiving. Another year is almost gone. So I'm thrilled to have all of you joining me again during this 11th year, and hopefully you'll join me again when we kick off year 12 in January 2026. But as far as this week's show, first of all, I have to apologize to those of you who are looking for my Tron Ares special this past week. Because I want to give you a package of interviews focusing on the interdependent elements of the film and those department heads, which include head of makeup and hair Donald Mowat, cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth, and re-recording mixer Ron Bartlett. I had to delay putting that together due to rescheduling of my interview with Ron Bartlett. No surprise here, but a publicist kind of screwed up. But Ron's interview is now done in the can, so you'll get to hear this award special this week. And as I've said before, even though some of you out there are not giving Tron Ares the love that it should have given the technical prowess and acumen of this film, these elements with makeup and hair, cinematography, and the sound design, the mixing, the editing, and costume design with this film, they all deserve some awards attention this award season. So for all the guilds out there, for all the critics associations, in addition to the Academy, the Golden Globes, you need to be looking at some of these people. And I just can't say enough about the quality of their work, but you'll hear me say plenty later this week. But for today, this week, we've got a theme of mystery going on. And I love the films that we're examining and the directors we're hearing from. I mentioned it to you at the close of last week's show. And, who doesn't love a good mystery? First up, today, you're going to hear from director Stephen Shimeek talking about Murder at the Embassy. It is the second film in the Miranda Green murder mystery franchise, and I hope there are many, many more films to come in that franchise. They are working on the third film now. Set in the 1930s in Cairo with pyramids and antiquities at the height of Egyptology and archaeology, there's more than a murder lurking around each mummy, and the film is shot on location in Cairo. And then at the midpoint of the show, you'll hear from writer-director LOTFY NATHAN talking about The Carpenter's Son, a film that has already drawn ire from some in the Christian community as it is developed from the apocryphal infancy Gospel of Thomas about the childhood of Jesus and fills in the New Testament canonical Gospels, often clashing with some of those accepted writings. It's a powerful and fascinating film that is exquisitely made. And did I mention it stars Nick Cage as Jesus' earthly father, the carpenter Joseph? Yeah, so stay tuned because that's going to come hit you at the midpoint of today's show. But first, let's take a little trip to Cairo with director Stephen Shimeek and Murder at the Embassy. This story is fun. The film is entertaining and beautiful as it drenches you in the beauty and wonder of Egypt. When private detective Miranda Green is called to investigate a suspicious murder inside Cairo's seemingly impenetrable British embassy, she discovers a second crime has been committed that could spark war across the globe. Everyone within the walls of the embassy is a suspect, but the ultimate evil force is lurking right around the corner. Directed by Stephen Shimeek and written by Mark Brennan, Murder at the Embassy stars Misha Barton returning as Miranda Green, Mito Hamada, who is superb in this film, Kojo Ata, Nell Barlow, Raha Rabari, Antonia Bernath, and Richard Delane. Now, I love Egyptology and archaeology and everything that surrounds the history and its uncovering. The period of the 30s, at the height of mummy discoveries, and I'm a longtime lover of mysteries, which you all know, which makes this the perfect film for me. Think Agatha Christie meets Indiana Jones meets Jessica Fletcher. The film is light and bright visually and in its tone. The mystery plot works, the characters are well done, with believable ambiguity and guilt spread around. Performances are solid. The chemistry between Misha Barton as Miranda and Mito Hamada as Mahmoud, the head of security at the British Embassy, is wonderful and fuels the development of their character arc. Personally, I would love to see the two of them pair up in another Miranda Green movie. Supporting cast who round out the potential murder suspects include a journalist, an actress, a secretary, a translator, and the ambassador and his daughter, with all cast extremely well. Most notably, Kojo Ata as our journalist Walter, and Antonia Bernath, who is a hoot and a holler, with shades of Judy Holliday as actress Betty. And of course, there's Miranda's trusted companion and assistant, her dog Blunder, who is a scene stealer. As you'll hear Stephen discuss, being a lover of mysteries himself, shooting this film and being in Cairo was a dream come true. Of course, quite often making dreams come true is not as easy as it sounds, and that was certainly the case here. Working again with cinematographer Brian Willem, who is also a producer on the film, and who has worked with Stephen on multiple prior films. The two developed a delightful visual grammar that showcased the region while constantly adapting their filming techniques to the changing conditions brought by light, the sand, desert winds, and the heat. It's not often that a filmmaker talks about hydration being a production element to concern himself with, but Stephen does just that, and talks about it as a production consideration, as well as cameras, lenses, production design, and everything else. Tricky was the editing process because of having to balance suspense, humor, and impart information. And for that, Stephen turned to editor Matthew Jensen, whose openness to experimentation allowed them to try various pacing and structural approaches until they found what best served the film. And how about not only working with a scene-stealing Blunder, the dog, but having a handful of camels, some donkeys, and yes, live scorpions. I can honestly say this is only, I think, the second or third film that I've ever spoken with filmmakers on that they got to talk about working with scorpions and scorpion wranglers. So, take a listen as Stephen Shimeek breaks down the making of Murder. Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
You have dazzled me once again.
Thank you so much.
I love films like this. I love stories like this. I loved Invitation to a Murder, which introduced us to Miranda Green. And
yes.
But this follow-up now with Murder at the Embassy, set in Cairo, in Egypt, this is like just delicious. And on every level, you immerse us in time and place. Your production design and set dress is fantastic on this one with all the detail. And Misha is superb as Miranda Green. And then you give her a playmate with Mito Hamada as Mahmoud. And watching the two of them is just, it's delicious. They are so great together on screen with their back and forth tit for tat. But I mean, just so much fun. I am envious.
Thank you so much for saying that.
I am envious.
I really appreciate it.
What led you to this franchise now? And I hope we're going to see not just one more, but many more.
Yes, please. Oh, so yeah, I guess I just first of all, thank you so much for all those kind words. It means a lot. It really does. There's so many people that put so much work into these projects, and it means a lot to hear people enjoy them so much. And yeah, I love everything about the murder mystery genre, and I'm hopeful. Right now, we are working on a third chapter, and you know, who knows? Maybe that'll lead us to even more. It was a joy to work with such a talented cast in such a beautiful place. I had never been to Egypt before. This movie is what brought me to the country, and now I can't wait to go back. And I tell everyone I know that they've got to visit because it's such an experience, and being able to be there in person and actually shoot there, like, it brings such an energy and a life to the project that we never would have been able to get otherwise. And I'm excited for people to see it. It was a lot of hard work, just kind of pulling together resources and working with crews across 3 different continents. There were challenges everywhere, but it was a very rewarding experience. And again, I'm really proud of what everyone was able to accomplish in this project, and I'm excited for people to see it.
Well, what really impresses me with this is the fact that you did shoot in Egypt, in Cairo. So we get that real authenticity. As we're in a car and we're going down an alley or a very narrow street and we're rounding a corner, we can see the wear and tear of the centuries-old sandstone buildings. And that's so important to immerse us in this time. And also, it takes us into the 30s when Egyptology and pyramids were being opened and discovered and really advanced, people were in tune to that. And you capture that feeling here by shooting in Cairo. And you're working with Brian again as your DP. How challenging was it logistically and in determining the visual grammar here? Because you keep this very intimate. You embrace the claustrophobic nature of these alleys, of these streets, of the little marketplace, of the jam-packed shops. Everything is on top of everything. And you counter that with the beautiful expanses of the pyramids in the desert. So I'm curious how you and Brian, logistically, how challenging was this for the two of you in determining your visual grammar?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love Brian. We've collaborated on several projects at this point, and he's also a producer on the film, which gives us a little bit of an edge to be able to kind of go right to the top with what we think we need for the visual elements of the film, and he'll be intimately familiar with the resources that we have available to us. So I've really enjoyed that partnership. And we've developed, enough of a shorthand at this point that it's easy for us to move quickly and kind of understand exactly what it is that we're going for. Honestly, one of the biggest challenges was that we were shooting in Egypt in the summertime. And it is so hot, punishingly hot. And we were drinking so much water, desperately trying not to get heat stroke. And every location offered a different challenge. Like, once you thought you'd figured out how to beat the heat, it tricked you. Because we started shooting at the pyramids, and there was nowhere to go for shade, but there was so much wind that it was cooling us down if we were standing in the right area and kind of like staying hydrated. And then when you're up against tall buildings in the middle of the street, now there's no wind, but there's shade everywhere. And so you've got this trade-off. And anyway, not to say too much about dealing with the heat, but I think that was challenge number 1, was stay focused, stay hydrated. And then, number 2, exactly like you're saying, like, visually, what do we want to do and how do we want to communicate that? And like I said, we've worked together on multiple projects at this point, and we can kind of just know where we want to go next to accomplish a certain thing, and it doesn't take a lot of talk to get there. We know how to execute what we want, and it's just a matter of deciding what that is, and then going out there and getting it.
How did the light impact what you and Brian wanted visually? Because I know that's a totally different, the light there is totally different than, say, shooting in the UK, shooting in the US.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And because of where it's located below the equator. But I'm curious, because you also get the sand, that wind brings sand particles. So you've got these really bright sun particles, the wind bringing sand particles into that light. So was that a problem or a consideration that the two of you had to have?
It was a surprise. I don't know why I didn't take into account the change in like particulate matter in the atmosphere, like you're saying, but it was funny because we would look because we'd shot so many films together. You know, we're kind of generally aware of like the look that we're going for and the settings that we need to get it. You know, how much ND are we dropping into the matte box or whatever, and we would constantly be shocked at how much brighter the sky was in Egypt, and we're like, am I not seeing this correctly? Like the sky's brighter, right? And then just kind of like dealing with that. Everything was there was always a surprise. There was always a challenge. But working with such talented, capable people, like it's fun to come across those challenges and just see how you're going to work together to accomplish what you need.
Because I love that you shot this. You go light and bright. So you capitalize on what Mother Nature is giving you with the sun and the reflection, which I'm sure Brian was cursing when you were out in the desert because of the reflection you're getting off the sand and the sun bouncing off of it. But but you chose to go, you could have gone so often with these mysteries, murder mysteries, people like to go darker. I love that you didn't. So it embraces the fun that we're having with Miranda.
Yeah.
And of course with Blunder. You got to have Blunder.
Yes, 100%.
So
yeah, he's a cast carryover for movie number one. Different dog, but just as charming and a little bit of a troublemaker. And Misha is such an animal person. You can really tell how much she loves dogs and animals in general when she interacts with our Zing. Zing is his name in real life, I guess, but with Blunder, the dog, the real star of the show. Yes. But yeah, there's so much going into everything at any given moment that it really is kind of like again just what's the challenge for today? How are we going to accomplish what we need to do and get on with it? But one of the things I think sets, like you were saying, sets this movie apart not only from the first film but from other murder mysteries is kind of like this adventure element. Right? Yeah. Like we get to not only have our suspects kind of locked in one single location, but then we've got our detective out adventuring basically and trying to gather more evidence and sort through these clues and stuff. And so it was really fun to be able to deal with that different approach to the structure, to the look of the film, to everything. Yeah, you really gave it an Indiana Jones feel. Right. By doing that. There's a mild little Indiana Jones inspiration in her wardrobe by the time she's out in the desert and riding camels. And
see, and there again, not only did you have Blunder to work with, but you had camels and you had donkeys. But so how well were your camels taking direction? Because I know a lot of guys that were actors and crew members on films like Humps that was all camels in the desert. And I've heard many stories about working with camels.
Oh yes. They can be very stubborn. But these camels, I guess, we also had really great camel wranglers. And so I don't know if how much of it is the animal's natural disposition or how much of it is how much they've worked with a specific trainer, but they behave themselves and they hit their marks more or less that we needed time and again. I was just constantly terrified, just given you stand next to a camel and you really start to realize how tall they are and how lanky they are and how awkward their movements can be, the way that they rock back and forth when they walk or the way that they jut forward when they sit down. I was like, please don't let our two leads fall off of these giant animals on day one of this shoot.
And of course, they like to spit too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, charming creatures.
And of course, not to be overlooked in the animal world of what you're dealing with, you included scorpions.
Oh yeah. And I was pretty psyched that we got to use. I was worried that would be one of the areas we'd have to use CGI. But our team in Egypt was like, no, we've got a guy. We'll bring a scorpion. So that was great.
Did you ever think in your wildest dreams, Stephen, when you started out in this business and you started directing films, that you would ever be working on a film with scorpion wranglers and camel wranglers?
No. Yeah, you just don't think of those things. This is really a dream come true for me. I've been obsessed with Egypt since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able not only to travel there, but to do what I love there is such a dream come true for me. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to be a part of this project, and I'm really excited to finally be able to start sharing it.
I'm excited for people to see it. Now, how challenging was the casting on this one? You've got Misha, who's leading the charge, but then you, as I mentioned before, Mito, who's wonderful, Antonia Bernoth as Betty. So often in this, she reminded me of like a Judy Holliday.
Sure, yeah.
Perfect 1930s and 40s slapstick, innocent, wide-eyed comedy. And of course, you get the wonderful Richard Delane, and even Kojo Ata as Walter is fantastic. So how did you put this cast together?
Well, again, this is so much credit is due to our casting directors that we're working again with teams across multiple continents. Like, the internet has facilitated something in the creative industry that was very difficult or impossible before. We were seeing tapes from people all over the place, and we were really able to find these shining performances out of all these people that sent in, and then when we went out approaching for other roles and sending out offers, we didn't have an ambassador, for instance, until the last possible moment. But when we were finally able to get Richard Delane in the film, just watching that man brings so much nuance into that role of, that you can feel the burden of this position that he holds and the situation that he's in and how he's kind of handling all of the moving pieces. Every single person in the movie brought something so special, I think. And it was a joy to get them all in a room together and just kind of let them go at it, Like, once you have that many talented people in the room, it's very easy. It's similar to, like, when we're shooting in Egypt is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me of making this movie beautiful. And when you have a cast this talented, like, all you've got to do is just make sure that you're making your day and getting the right, angles on everyone so that you've got the footage that you need. But in terms of, talent and bringing something special to each one of the roles, like, great cast.
Well, I would be remiss not to ask you about your work with Matthew Jensen and the editing on this. You keep this moving, you keep it entertaining, you balance it with thoughtful moments when Miranda is thinking and being very observational. How challenging was the edit on this, if at all, to find that balance?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I love working with Matt. This is the first time I've been able to work with him on a feature film, and we've been friends for a long, long time. But he's superb and brings so much. He'll suggest things that I never would have thought of, and will experiment. I'm a big fan of experimentation. Like, anything you've got, show me, and the movie will tell us if it's right or not, And so he was really open to, continuing to explore with the kind of pacing that we needed. Because, like we were talking about with like the suspense and the way that murder mysteries draw you in, how can we keep presenting the right questions at the right time, and how can we keep some information away from the audience until we need them to know that? And along the way, how are we making sure that we're giving little comic relief every now and again, and like balancing all of those things is a challenge, but it's also so much fun to kind of play with it and see where you can take it and what you can make of it.
And I have to commend the two of you on what you did with those slow pans across the desktop and the slow pan going through the shop of curiosities. You gave us some eye candy and put it in the back of our minds. And things could be MacGuffins, things could be part of the mystery. But I love how you pace those very, very cleanly, evenly, and slow against some of the more rapier elements. And I just think you did a great job with that, you and Matt.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear. And again, there are so many talented people putting their all into every element of this movie. And it's so nice to hear shout outs for specific roles like that. Like everyone really did bring their A game, and I think it shows.
Well, I can't wait for the next one. I want more after that, and I wouldn't mind a series, Stephen.
All right. Let's do it.
Stephen, thank you so much. This has been wonderful getting to talk with you about Murder at the Embassy, and I hope we get to talk about the next one.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was director Stephen Shimeek talking about Murder at the Embassy, which you can see right now in theaters, on demand, and streaming. And I gotta tell you, it's so entertaining. It's easygoing. The mystery is fun. The location is glorious. I think you'll really enjoy it. And it's nothing that you have to think too hard about. It's just pure entertainment. And it's perfect, especially now as we're getting into the holiday season and people need a respite from the hustle and bustle, the incessant parties, and all that shopping that hopefully they will be doing. But now, we're going to switch gears and talk about another type of mystery with writer-director LOTFY NATHAN and his film, The Carpenter's Son. Now, this is not your cut-and-dried, faith-based, or historical religious film. LOTFY pushes the envelope here as he draws from the apocryphal infancy Gospel of Thomas for this story. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, there has long been dispute on these Gospels, which number anywhere from 14 in Protestant Bibles, 11 in Catholic Bibles, and possibly up to 54 bits and pieces which make up the Apocrypha, all of which have long been denounced for the most part as the accepted biblical canon. They are not viewed as accepted biblical canon. And in large part, this is because of Jesus being depicted, especially in the Gospel of Thomas, as being vindictive or somewhat punishing, not to mention performing possible miracles, which flies in the face of the New Testament, which has his first real miracle, if I'm recalling my Bible correctly, is turning water into wine, or wine into water. But there's wine involved and there's water involved. But from a historical aspect, the Apocrypha are quite interesting, and in the case of the infancy Gospel of Thomas, on which LOTFY bases The Carpenter's Son, much light is shed on the life of a young teenage Jesus. What LOTFY delivers is a fascinating story. I was riveted and enthralled from beginning to end. And yes, the fact that Nick Cage stars as Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, aka the carpenter, adds another whole layer to the film. As I said, it's written and directed by LOTFY NATHAN. The Carpenter's Son stars Nick Cage as the carpenter, Noah Jupe as the boy, aka Jesus, and FKA Twigs as the mother, aka Mary. Combining inspiration from the apocryphal Gospels with a focus on emotional realism and narrative depth. In this exclusive interview, LOTFY discusses drawing from non-canonical sources, particularly the infancy Gospel of Thomas, to fill in gaps about Jesus' youth, and to imagine the dynamic between Joseph and Jesus, despite the original text's lack of direct narrative. So much of the Gospel of Thomas is bits and pieces. It might be lines of perhaps a parable or a poem, but there is no direct narrative. But you can piece it together. What can be described as an origin story, which I think this is. The film explores the father-son complexity, showing Joseph as a strict, deeply religious man who feels overwhelmed and sometimes confounded by the extraordinary child in his care. And LOTFY sought to ground this with believable motivations and moments of conflict and connection. The result is an immersive narrative, particularly that father-son dynamic, which is the heart and soul of the film. Shot on location in Greece and Crete, and on 35mm, the film is visually stunning. Simon Bowles comes in as cinematographer, and his work is stunning. You may know his work best, U.S. audiences, from the film The Anatomy of a Fall, where he was working with lots and lots and lots of snow, murder, and mystery. But his work is just flawless. It's impeccable. ECUs and macros abound here, and they work so well as connective tissue, metaphorically speaking, to the wonder and importance of a thing or a moment, especially when we're talking biblically. They also provide perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing. Now, as we dig into the making of The Carpenter's Son, LOTFY explains the meticulous world-building process, including the historical research and collaboration with his production designer, Jean-Vincent Pouzos, and Simon Bowles. This is an extremely interesting aspect of this conversation, focuses on the sound design, which is impeccable, and in this case, it's critical for the storytelling and the world building, thanks to limited dialogue. From the night wind in the desert to the clop of donkey hooves or sandaled feet walking on rocks and dry dirt, to a wooden door latch being not so quietly opened in the night by a 15-year-old trying to sneak out, to crickets and night noise, village voices in the daytime, the ambient soundscape speaks loudly, playing a stronger narrative role in creating a vivid and visceral atmosphere. And now adding to this sound design is Lawrence Dangle's unique score, which incorporates chorale music and ambiguous instrumentation, carefully blending with the ambient elements to maintain tonal ambiguity, sometimes making the audience question whether or not you're hearing something good or something evil. And of course, yes, we talk about Nick Cage. And LOTFY has a lot to say about Nick and his performance as he embodied Joseph's intense internal struggle, religious fervor, and a sense of the overwhelming responsibility as Jesus' guardian. We see the internal struggles ultimately manifest in an emotional explosion of anger and frustration in the third act, as only Nick Cage can do. It is Nick Cage at his most Nick Cage, let me tell you. Contrasting Cage is the calm of F.K. Twiggs as Mary, while Noah Jupe is outstanding as the angst-filled 15-year-old Jesus who's baffled, confused, angry, tempted, and unsure of what this power is that he seems to have, or its purpose. I don't think he's quite grasped the purpose part yet, but the confusion and the angst is all there. And the way that LOTFY has written this and structured it, Jesus has so many qualities and characteristics and traits that we see in 15-year-olds today. So it doesn't matter if it's 15 AD, if it's 2025. There's a commonality there that people today can tap into and relate to. So on every level, I've got to say, The Carpenter's Son is magnificent. So take a listen as writer-director LOTFY Nathan discusses it all.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
Well, hello, LOTFY. I am so excited to be speaking with you this morning.
Oh, that's great.
I love this film. I was riveted from beginning to end.
Wow. Okay. Great to hear. Thank you so much.
It was enthralling. It was mesmerizing. The story is absolutely fascinating. The fact that you went to the apocryphal Gospels for this, because this is an area that a lot of people, they don't even want to consider. They don't even want to look at. It's like these Gospels, these apocryphals do not even exist in the realm of Christianity or Judaism. And I've always found them quite fascinating because it just builds on missing chapters. We knew nothing about Jesus as a child, really. And to see what you have done to bring, and particularly with this Gospel of Thomas, which is not really, the last time I looked into anything on it, it's not really narrative. It's more...
No, not at all.
It's like slices of life, piece here, a piece there, disjointed parable or poem. And
exactly. It's like a laundry list of hectic events of an adolescent, you know.
You do such a wonderful job of making this a cohesive, immersive narrative. You build this world. You immerse us in this world. But then one of the key things that grounds this for a viewing audience is your construction between the carpenter and the boy, for Joseph and Jesus, this whole father-son complexity. And we have an angsty 15-year-old, and I don't care if it's 15 AD or 2025 AD. Teenagers are teenagers. And we feel that realism. That really comes through. And a lot of what he's experiencing, we're seeing through his eyes. The temptations, the curiosity. That is a 15-year-old through and through.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have kids?
No. I have four nephews. So
okay, so you get the idea. Yeah. I mean, but I mean, we've all been 15, so I think we get it. But absolutely, I think that was a important thing to dive into, you know, and when I read between the lines, even of the infancy gospel, you know, you've got there is a dynamic there, even without a narrative, you know, and a real story. There is a dynamic to be read between Joseph and Jesus, you know, and a certain rebelliousness, you know, that I think is needed. I needed to find the motivation for that, where that's coming from, you know, and then also to think where he goes in his life, you know, and I part of the effort here was to try to design this in a way that it could fit neatly in the timeline, you know, of the New Testament as well, you know. So, you know, I wanted by the end of the story to feel that we're sort of being, you know, gently pushed into the future of maybe the character, the version of him that the Christian community knows and understands.
Yeah. And I think you have done an excellent job of filling that gap and staying, you know, and fueling the timeline. I think, you know, it really fits. It's believable. It's resonant. And I'm just so impressed that you tackled something that is, number one, doing anything with the apocryphal Gospels is controversial in the eyes of so many people. But for you to take this and you really humanize this story. I know we've got supernatural doings, but of course, if you're a true believer, it's God works in mysterious ways. So, so it's not out of bounds to even think that and call this like, ooh, a supernatural sci-fi or horror film or something. No, if you are a believer, it's God works in mysterious ways. Yes, we can have sticks turn into snakes and things like this. This is what we expect. Cecil B. DeMille did it with the Ten Commandments, so hey, you can do it here. Just so well crafted and brought out, but it all starts with your world building. How challenging was the world building on this one? Your location is designed. Jean Vincent's production design is exceptional. Yes. And then you've got Simon's amazing cinematography. And all of it is in this really cloistered, surrounded by mountains, blanketed area. So talk to me about creating this world.
Yeah, so that really started before I even began a first draft. I thought, okay, this is something I want to do. Big can of worms for many reasons. In not making this film too broad. Yeah. One, I thought that in the spirit of going for this genre approach, part of me always, and also this being a kind of side story, an origin story, I wanted it to be, to feel pinpointed, and enclosed in a focused place, a kind of incidental place that they might have passed through in their journey, and also just the daunting task of trying to tell this period story, and I needed some bearings there. So first thing I did was work with a historian, a researcher, to give me as much just setting and context as possible. Let's speculate where the Holy Family may have been residing during this window of years, what society was like then, what a small village could have looked like then, what people believed and what people did for work, all of that stuff. And I embarked on the first draft that way, trying to just keep it as narrowed down as possible, and then, from there, it deviates greatly from that, because after all, it is a lot of speculation, of what things were like back then. So I took plenty of liberties at the same time, but I had these things in mind, these kind of anchor points of location setting, things like that, and then handed those things over, say, to Jean Vincent, our production designer. He's a lot more freewheeling, he's not fussing himself with trying to make something that's perfectly historically accurate. Right. He just wants it to feel real, to feel vivid, and I totally embraced that as well. I think that was the manner that I ended up going with the script and the story, with a lot of embellishments, things that deviate from the apocryphal Gospels and from what would be considered accurate, like the inclusion of the stranger, for example, which wasn't in the infancy Gospel. And then same with Simone, our DP, we talked about giving it this wanting to give it this tactile, realistic, naturalistic kind of feeling. So that was something in the film that we chose. We ended up shooting on this 2-perf 35 millimeter, which has a bit more character to it and is a bit narrower and more closed in, the feeling of the whole thing. So that ended up helping a lot. And then the location was, we explored a number of different countries. We were looking at the Canary Islands. We went to Jordan. Greece had, just great partners to work with. And the setting was really exciting. I thought it was nice to have something contrary to like this kind of desert, rocky desert landscape purely that you see in a lot of the biblical films, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of variety there. I mean, we were filming on the island of Crete. That's where you get those great mountainous landscapes at the beginning of the film after the title, and also in a countryside kind of farmland of outside of Athens.
I mean, I think the location is perfect. But now, your cinematography, something that I noticed here, you and Simone do not shy away from extreme close-ups. You embrace extreme close-ups in this film. And
yeah,
I think they are fantastic. But I'm curious your thoughts on going that route, because so many filmmakers may shy away. Either they go into overkill or they shy away. But they work so well for the Carpenter's Son. So I'm curious your thoughts on going that route.
Yeah, I mean, the idea with some of the lenses we were using and some of the closer shots was to just have this kind of, closer subjectivity to our characters,
Mm-hmm.
And again, just to kind of feel like we're really narrowing the setting,
Yeah.
and the scope. There's something important to me in this one to not get too grand or too large in the space. Like even with this being the story of the Holy Family, to still keep the scope kind of narrowed and intimate. So that it was part of that decision.
It works so well here. And while you may think that some of the shots, some of the ECUs, it's like, why is there a shot on that? Many instances, it's a foreshadowing, just like some of the nightmares that we're seeing, foreshadowing of the future. And that in and of itself is so biblical in the accepted canons that it really works so well. But another element you have here that is just knocked my socks off, your sound design, because your dialogue is minimal in this film. So much of this, it's ambience and observation, and the sound design from the beginning of this film, the attention that is paid to the soundscape with night winds, with breathing, Nick Cage's breathing, desert hallucinations, sounds that come with that, night crickets, the rattling of wood as a teenager is trying to sneak out of somewhere, and you can never do it silently. We all know this. So we hear, the wood latch, the rustling of wind in the leaves, the sandals on the broken rubble and rock off of the cliffs and mountains. This soundscape is stunning. What were you thinking of when working with your sound designer to come up with this soundscape, which then incorporates the amazing score, which is just, it's stunning. It's tonally unique. The instrumentation is so key in certain places, bringing in that chorale music and the chorale, but going with a more bass sound. So it's kind of ambiguous as to whether we're hearing good or evil. Talk to me about this soundscape, LOTFY.
Wow, it's so fun hearing your take on this. I love it. It's just great to hear your input here and that this stuff resonated with you. First of all, just as a side note, the sound, was important for a lot of. Again, it's really the intimacy, the subjectivity of the boy. I thought that it was important to have this kind of hyper-focused detail there, this kind of empathy that he possesses, being almost supernatural. It's kind of like being able to hear and feel people from afar, and I think that was a nice challenge to try to portray. And then sound also is just such an important thing for the genre, that I think that it was a big effort to try to give us this most visceral, vivid sound that we could have, and letting that be an unsettling thing a lot of times as well. So that was a big point. I mean, I think it really didn't feel like a movie until we had that stuff in place. My process, I think, in the future would be to have a lot more sound design done, even in the front end of editing, and to have that to work with, because it really is, to me, it's especially with this genre,
Yeah.
And then the music, we had an amazing musician, Lawrence Dangle, who I think did some great unlikely sounds and wanted to have these kind of, I think the music was also an opportunity from the beginning. What I thought is that it should indicate that this is a different telling of this story, immediately in the music, so, and I think he really succeeded in that, at times, in feeling that it's a different account,
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said it is, as I said, it's unique. It is tonally unique.
Yeah.
And the way that the entire sound mix and the sound editing is done, it just complements the visuals so beautifully and completes the building of this world. Now, I have to say, I am just beyond thrilled Nick Cage did this film. And what tickles me is we get into the third act and we really get to see Nick Cage do Nick Cage, exploding. And all these uncertainties and all this anger and all this rage that has been building up in him for the past 15 years. He unleashes it on Mary. That's full throttle Nick Cage. It works so well and puts so much in perspective and really makes you think about that whole Joseph and Mary and Jesus dynamic and how it all began. And absolutely amazing. What was your thinking, you and Nick together, because I know how he delves into a character and how he builds a character. What was your collaborative thinking on taking this character arc with Joseph to what we ultimately saw?
Yeah, well, my thinking in my writing of the character, the journey that I wanted Joseph to go on in the story,
both.
Or are you talking about
both, and
then how it was to give that to Nick and how he interpreted
it?
So
both,
right?
Yeah.
So initially, I, like we were saying at the beginning, there is a dynamic that can be culled from the infancy gospel between Joseph and Jesus. I found him to be confounded by Jesus, and overwhelmed by having to be his guardian while he has strength and legacy that's far beyond his understanding or grasp, right? It was an interesting thing to dwell on his character. I hadn't really seen too much of that, excuse me, in the past. But what I found was someone who I imagined would be incredibly religious. And when you look, couple that with the research that I had done and what it was to practice Judaism in antiquity, incredibly dogmatic and strict and regimented, and that he I imagine, would have been a fervent believer, who at the same time is, for all intents and purposes, having to take care of his boss's son, or however you want to put it, and just the overwhelming responsibility of that. I also, in an effort to think of this all as realistically as possible, and with the genre in mind, I thought about his visions that Joseph had before and immediately after the birth of Jesus, indicating what he was supposed to do, and thought, what would it be to actually have a vision, That yes, it's a divine thing, and that's usually the way that it's perceived, but it could also be overwhelming and terrifying, no matter where it's coming from, right? And that after so many years where we're kind of adrift in the sea of Jesus' life on earth. Sorry, I'm just coughing a little bit here. Sorry, trying to drink some water. It just started. I started to find this great conflict between the two of them, where Joseph maybe fundamentally felt there's something that he needs to impart to Jesus, to teach him. Somewhere he needs to take him in his life, and I also found myself really referencing Amadeus, the Milos Forman film, thinking about Salieri next to Mozart, and that kind of proximity of characters, when he's sort of like next to divinity, and I thought that was really, really interesting. Then Nick, of course, took it, took command of it in such a great way, and he really internalized the character and found, I think, I felt that he was kind of bottling something until later on in the story, which makes perfect sense, for his character, this kind of like doubt that is dormant, that he's wrestling with it, I just think he just handled that so brilliantly.
Absolutely. I mean, it took me aback. By the time we got to that third act and that emotional explosion, I was like, wow. Yeah. And then it's kudos to our wonderful mother who is there getting that wrath, and she never wavers. Her faith is so strong in her task, what she has been tasked by God. She doesn't waver. She doesn't even flinch. Yeah. And when he's yelling, "We're leaving," and it's like, okay, it just, the calm was amazing. But there's so much there's so much contrast that you have happening here, but something that carries through, and that I think is part of you in making this film, in writing this film. You said it, an origin story. So many of our best origin stories are fathers and sons.
That's true.
You look at Superman, superheroes. You look at Superman. You look at a lot of the MCU. You look at Black Panther. You look at Tony Stark and his dynamic.
And Star Wars,
Star Wars, yes. So you see all of this. And I know that it was through your father, who is more or less a religious historian, I would say, that how much of him and growing up with your dad influenced your interest in the apocryphal Gospels that would lead you into this story?
That's that's a great question. I mean, I probably don't know to what degree that plays into the characterizations, but I'm sure there's something there, but really to me it was a nice creative gesture that I felt I was doing throughout, him having introduced this to me and my genuine fascination with it as a story, and then spending years making a movie about it. I think there was something to that exchange that was very rewarding for me. I mean, I think it's probably in ways that I don't quite understand, but they're nonetheless.
Now, just on every level, LOTFY, this is just, I love this film.
It's lovely to hear. Thank you so much. Really.
I didn't know what to expect when I first started getting blast from the girls, and I'm like, I was intrigued, little teasers, little this, and I had no clue where this was going. And you more than exceeded my anticipation or potential expectations. And, of course, the icing on the cake was the horned snake. That is so cool.
Oh, yeah. Can you believe that snake? That's a real snake. It's a Saharan desert viper.
So you were
I
using...
mean, it's modeled after a real snake. It's designed after a real snake. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that was like the icing on the cake for me, was a horned snake.
Yeah. I thought, well, which snake do we want to reference for the devil incarnate? It's got to be this. And then I saw this horned viper, that is a real kind of snake with horns. I thought, this is incredible. So that's what we ended up modeling it after. An actual Saharan horned viper was impossible to get, unfortunately, because they're highly poisonous. But so it goes. And
I bet if you could have gotten it, you would have.
Yeah, I would have.
Oh, LOTFY.
We tried.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today about the Carpenter's Son. This has been so wonderful. And I can't wait to see what you do next. And I hope we get to chat again.
Me too. Well, it was a pleasure, really. Thank you for the time. That was great.
And that was LOTFY Nathan discussing The Carpenter's Son, which is in theaters right now. I encourage you to see it. No matter your religious bent or faith, it's a well-done film, exceedingly well-done film. And the story is fascinating, whether there is truth to it, whether it's for believers or non-believers. And it boasts amazing performances, notably Nick. So do yourself a favor and check out The Carpenter's Son in theaters. Well, as I'm sure you're not surprised, that is all the time we have today. Yes, we ran late again. Make sure to join me again next week for more interesting, enlightening, and entertaining conversations about some more films that are hitting theaters and as well as on demand and streaming. I've got some fun holiday films coming up that we'll be talking about, including, I think maybe next week, might be hearing from the filmmakers of A Chuck E. Cheese Christmas, animated fun for all, and you don't want to miss out on that. So, until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.